Looks like we're ready to go. Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the City Council meeting for the 8th day of November, 2023. It is 7 p.m. This is the City of Edina City Council meeting. And as Director Benarott mentioned earlier, before the meeting started, we're doing these meetings in a hybrid fashion, which means that we've got people that are able to watch us in some form remotely, either on cable TV, at edinamn.gov live meetings, or on facebook.com/edinamn. And so we welcome their participation and provide them the opportunity to comment on different things that are going on in the meeting, whether it's during community comment. In this case, we've got one public hearing matter this evening as well. Coming up early in the meeting will be the community comment. I'm going to put the number back up on the screen quickly. And write that number down, folks, so that when it comes up on cue, and it'll come up shortly, as I mentioned, right after the approval of the meeting agenda. And then we'll first go to folks that are in the audience that wish to address the council on a matter of concern to them, and then we'll go to folks that might be listening in that have a concern as well. So having provided that information, I'll call the meeting to order, and I'll ask Director Benarott to call the roll.
Councilmember Agnew.
Here.
Councilmember Jackson.
Here.
Councilmember Risser.
Here.
Mayor Hovland.
Here. Next is the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have a form of meeting agenda that's been published both for our benefit and for the benefit of the general public. Is there anyone on the council or staff member who wishes to modify the meeting agenda in any form or fashion? Is there a motion to approve the meeting agenda as published?
So moved. A second.
Member Jackson moves. Member Agnew seconds the adoption of the meeting agenda as shown, as published. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption of the meeting agenda as published for this November 8, 2023 meeting of the Edina City Council, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. And now we are at community comment, and we'll get that number up on the screen just momentarily here. But first I'm going to turn to our audience, and I see some folks in the audience that may wish to visit with the council on a matter of concern to them, and I'll welcome anybody in the audience who wishes to talk to the council to come on up. And you'll have 3 minutes, and as some of you know who have talked to the council about matters of concern to you before, you'll get a yellow amber light when you've got 30 seconds left, and then you can wrap up your comments so that we treat everybody the same. You'll each have 3 minutes. And if you have anything you want to have us make part of the record, you can certainly give it to Director Benarott when the testimony is completed. And we're ready to go, it looks like.
Okay. Janie Weston, 6136 Brookview Avenue. I am here for the open comment because I hate to say it, what I'm pretty sure is a big safety issue regarding 4404 Valley View Road, the former Burley site, now the row 2 duplexes. Now that the second floor is going, the walls are going up for the west side of the west unit. You can see where windows are going to be. They all have headers, so those are all intended to be window openings. I took these pictures this afternoon, or noonish today. The setback is 5 feet. The power pole is on the property line. There's one to the north, one to the south, 5 feet. And power lines go here. Power lines are up here. We have 2 transformers here. we have a window there, a window there, a window there. And that one might be an issue too. There's a view from the north looking at it. Give you another perspective. Okay, I'm gonna go to this one. Just for your future information, anytime you're looking at a request for a variance for reduced setbacks, this is something you must keep in mind. This is for public safety. Xcel Energy has what's called the 12-foot rule, in that you may not have a window that is within 12 feet of where aerial power lines are located. I learned this when my husband and I built our shop, our garage shop. We moved it 13 feet from the property line. It used to be, well, we thought it was going to be closer to the back lot line. We moved it 13 feet so we would not have that issue with a window on the back side of it on the second floor. This is the second floor for this unit. The reason why this exists makes absolute good sense. And I know this because an acquaintance down in Chicago had a fellow office worker who, in their building, they lived in a renovated older building that had power lines running up the alley outside their windows. They could open their windows fully. On a day that was nice enough, they had all their windows open to enjoy the fall weather or whatever it was. An office worker had a sweater or jacket on a chair or whatever, blew out the window, got hung up on the power lines outside the window.
Ms. Weston, I need to have you finish making your point. I think we're getting the point, but you're over the 3-minute mark now, and I want to make sure that we're sensitive from a time standpoint for everybody else too.
Okay. Unthinkingly, they grabbed it and they were set on fire and electrocuted. I don't think they lived.
Yep.
So that's why we have this rule. Here's a quick model. If you've got your power lines, your power pole within 5 feet, and I put this together to just make it easier to understand what this is. If this is 12 feet from the pole and it's 5 feet away, you can see there's an issue, okay? It's an arc from where the lines are on the pole of 12 feet, okay?
Okay, thank you.
All right, and I spoke with the planning department, with Emily Bodecker, about it this afternoon. So they have these photos, and they're going to look into it.
For that, and our staff will check into that, I'm sure.
So be careful of those side setbacks. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. I'm Owen Michelson, 4520 West 56th Street. I'm a former Edina School Board member. Yesterday's election was conducted by the City of Edina. It cost $150,000. Edina Public Schools is responsible for paying this. I learned this information in a series of two phone conversations with Sharon Allison, City Clerk. I presented this information at the October 16th Edina School Board meeting. Immediately after my remarks, Chair Allenberg had this to say, and I quote, "To provide clarification from a data perspective, because the city is also running an election, there's no cost to the district, so there isn't a $150,000 cost." Thus, Chair Allenberg's understanding is at odds with City Clerk Allison's. This is a lot of money, and the city and the residents of Edina deserve to understand who's responsible for paying for this. Therefore, my question to you is Edina Public Schools responsible for this $150,000 payment? So I look forward to hearing your response.
Thank you, Mr. Michelson.
Do I wait or do I come back at next?
Why don't you wait until we finish all community comment, and we'll see if we can answer that question tonight. I think I know the answer, but I'll defer to our city manager. So stand by, and please don't leave yet. Anyone else in the audience wish to speak to the council? Okay, let's turn now. Nobody online. All right, we spent several months negotiating this payment on the election issue with the school district. Manager Neal and I were involved in it. Councilmember Jackson was involved in the conversations, and an agreement was struck. How it relates to the situation where there was also an issue for the city involved, I'll defer to our city manager and ask him to opine on it if he can.
I can on this one. Your Honor, members of council, we have a 1-year agreement in place with the school district right now. And this agreement is different than previous agreements in 2 respects. One is that it had a cap. It does have a cap of $150,000. And 2, what we had pledged to track our time and our expenses and provide some verification of those expenses up to that level of $150,000. So it could be less than that. I don't think it will be, but we haven't certainly put all our costs together for the election from yesterday yet. But we don't see, and I did ask the city attorney to take a look at the applicability of the agreement. We don't see any reason that it wouldn't be in place, so we intend to do what we had planned to do and put together our costs and present them to the school district for payment under the agreement.
All right, very good. And then someone from staff can coordinate with Excel
Sure.
and the developer on the appropriate issue I think Ms. Weston raised, which is a really important safety issue. I don't know whether they, with the transformer, if they can vary the line, or they must have had some conversation with Excel.
I'm not sure if if maybe Mr. Teague or Mr. Milner know, but
Or Director Milner possibly may have.
We'll reach out to Excel. That's not a rule I've ever heard of before.
Yeah.
So we'll reach out and provide comments back.
All right, very good. Thank you. So that'll be 2 weeks from now that we'll have those responses. And then, as is our practice, our city manager is going to respond to community comments that were made at the prior meeting, and there were several comments made, and I think it's going to take some time to get through the appropriate responses to those comments. So we'll pass it back to Manager Neal.
thank you for that preview. Your Honor and members of council, I'm going to go through a number of them, actually, starting back at our October 3rd meeting. You may remember that we had some folks from Morningside, the C Special Assessment Group, that was here that night. They made a presentation about the broader policy issues around special assessments. We responded to those and asked the city engineer if he would respond to them as well, and he did. Next is we had Meriwether Felt, who had concerns about the lighting at Avail Academy, and we have done some regulatory investigation on that issue, and they have adjusted some of their lights. We adjusted one of their lights, and they are now in compliance. Paul Thompson spoke to the council that night about the Morningside ice rink and whether it would be available this winter. It will. We had another Morningside C a person who was here talking about the sidewalks and whether there was consensus about adding sidewalks to the Morningside C project. Andy Brown spoke that night about natural occurring affordable housing and whether there was building code issues that we could adjust to make NOAA housing more prevalent in the community. And we had a final comment from Morningside D&E residents for their special assessment project. This person was commenting on the concept that at the same time that we're doing special assessments, we are also increasing our tax levy at the same time. So there are some folks who are in that range where they're paying both, right? They're paying an increase in their property tax levy. At the same time, they're paying special assessments. However, their special assessments they're paying are less because of the property tax levy that they're also paying. So that was a complicated answer for them. At our last meeting, we had a number of questions posed by Ralph Zickert, and Ralph had some questions that relate to Lake Cornelia and how staff have managed a contract in the Lake Cornelia area, the growth of curly pondweed, and what we're doing to prevent that. So some of his concerns really are around what are the criterias that we have used for lake treatment, and whether we're using the right criteria. I think he would say that we're not. I think our staff and Watershed District and DNR would say that we are. So we're really in a kind of a disagreement when it comes to that. He had some questions about, he brought his rake the last time and he threw the rake a couple of times and talked about how could a vendor that we hired possibly have done as much rake throwing and analysis of the weeds that come back up with that rake that the vendor says they did. I've had a number of discussions with Mr. Milner and his team, direct conversations. We are comfortable that the contractor did the work that the contractor was paid to do. We think that we got the contract work that we needed in order to make a decision about treating the lake or not treating the lake for curly pondweed. At the time when we had to make that decision, all indications showed that there wasn't going to be a problem with curly pondweed in 2023. However, as we know now, there was. And the indication at the time when the decision was made, there were a number of indications that we followed, and we still got the curly pondweed that developed by seed, actually, which is an unusual occurrence that happened in Lake Cornelia at that point. There was a question from Mr. Zickert about whether or not we are following our policy, when it comes to aquatic plant treatments. We adopted a policy in 2014 to focus on aquatic vegetation management. The policy establishes a system to prioritize water bodies, define management service levels, and how people can go about acquiring those services. That policy is now part of our Water Resources Management Plan, Section 3.4.2.4. The question is, did we handle that policy the right way? And we think that we did. We brought in expert advice for inspection on curly pondweed, and it was found in a very small number of spots. So given that was one of the reasons we chose not to treat. In subsequent conversation, we learned that even the experts at the Watershed District were surprised by the curly leaf pondweed response that we got this year. It's not something they had seen in their 20 years of professional service. So that is how we characterize a response to a number of questions from Mr. Zickert. At the October 17th council meeting, Mr. David Frankel was there and made comments on a number of different items. So the first was a set of kind of disparaging statements he made about city staff and how we feel about the Americans with Disabilities Act. I think all of us have a family or friend that have temporary or permanent mobility issues. I do. I feel very strongly that we enforce and we build to an ADA quality whenever we can and whenever budget allows us to. So we do care about ADA compliance. The city staff care a great deal. We have a full-time staff member who manages our risk and safety functions. Her name is Amy Murray, and Amy Murray is really exceptional at what she does. She's very good. We work with our building inspections division frequently when we're working on projects of our own to make sure we're in compliance with ADA. We have a comprehensive accessibility study that we did in 2021, and that culminated with a council approval of the ADA transition plan for city facilities, which is in front of you tonight. That was approved in March of 2022. We know that Mr. Frankel did reach out to the Minnesota Council on Disability, because they reached out back to us to tell us that, and to give us their confidence that they think we're doing it the right way. We've answered all their questions. We've invited them to tour if they want to tour. We feel pretty comfortable with what they'll see. And if they do give us some advice on how to do it better, we'll take their advice for sure. Next, Mr. Frankel raised some concerns about my performance review and whether my contract will be renewed after December 31st, 2023. So my current contract, was a 3-year contract that was approved by the council in March of 2021. It does expire in the end of this year, 2023. However, there is an auto renewal for 2-year time periods if both parties agree that they'd like to move forward with the same terms and conditions. So we haven't had that conversation yet, but I hope we do. I'm going to talk a little bit later about a proposal for my annual performance review, and I hope we can move forward on that as well. Mr. Frankel warned the council, and this is his quote, "There's a buyout clause in the city manager's contract of 1 year's salary." That is not true. I don't know where he sees that in that document because it's not present. In fact, that would be illegal. We can have city employees can have a 6-month severance, but nobody has a 1-year buyout. So I don't know what he's talking about there. And I won't speculate on why he would raise that the way he did. The final question that I'll raise is around P cards and Chick-fil-A. Some of you may remember, 8 or 10 years ago, we had a comparable kind of issue when Frank Lorenz criticized the council about why were we buying $10,000 worth of pizza for all the city staff to eat. And of course, that's not what it was. We were buying $10,000 of pizza because we serve pizza at concession stands to Edina residents and guests from out of town. And that's exactly what happened in this situation too. I can assure you that staff that work here are very much aware that there are a group of people that scour the P card data every month and look for things to point at and talk about publicly. That's where this comes from. The guy at our ice arena who made this decision to bring Chick-fil-A sandwiches in for a Beauty League game made a great decision, and I hope he makes the same decision again. He bought Chick-fil-A sandwiches in mass for $4 a sandwich and sold them for $8 a sandwich at the ice arena. And we think that's a good use of the P card to make that transaction go quickly at a time when you're serving hot sandwiches to people. So our folks at the ice arena were happy. Our guests and visitors were happy that they had the opportunity to have a Chick-fil-A sandwich as opposed to whatever else we were going to serve them. We had the foresight, this guy had the foresight to talk to our health department about how do we do this in a way that's safe, how do we buy sandwiches and transport them and serve them here in a way that's safe and meets sanitation codes. So we had some good help with our own coworkers in that regard. And that's all I got tonight. Thank you.
Did Manager Neal's report prompt any questions from any council members? All right, I had one. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you.
Councilmember Agnew.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Going back to the contractor that we use for water assessments, could I ask that when we do this in the future, we do some type of spot checking, have someone go throughout the day and just kind of have more eyes on, just to validate and put us in a position where we don't have to do fact checking after the fact.
Sure.
Thank you.
I had a question related to that same topic brought up by Mr. Zickert, and he was frustrated. He lives on the lake. We've seen over the past few years this curly pond weed or whatever it's called has caused us to have to post signage that the lake is toxic. Don't let your dog go in there. Don't you go in there. And it's a shame, even though it's a real shallow body of water and is probably subject to some of these sorts of problems that can evolve with the use of fertilizers and other things getting into those bodies of water. it did make me think about, as I listened to you, the question arose in my mind of what we can do for 2024 and beyond to best protect and improve Lake Cornelia. And so that's not a question for you. I don't think it's a broader question for our water experts and any experts we hire.
Right.
But I think we deserve it as a community to know the answer to that. And those folks that live on that lake that have had the use of that lake for many, many years, and all of a sudden they can't use it during certain parts of the years, I think they deserve to know too, and
Sure.
they deserve to feel comfortable that we're doing everything we can to make sure that that lake is as clean as it can be, even though sometimes some things like this might happen that create toxicity. Member Jackson.
Yeah, I actually have a factual question about that. Is it the curly leaf pondweed that creates the toxicity, or is it the blue-green algae, and are they
I
linked?
think it's the latter.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's the
So
algae,
we got two things to deal with.
Yeah, two things to deal with. One is unsightly and one is dangerous, but I don't think
Yeah.
the curly leaf pondweed is toxic. Is that
Yep.
correct? Okay. Yeah, thank you.
This all kind of comes back to relate to the discussion that that staff have had with the council about what are we trying to accomplish with our lake treatment, and are we trying to create fishable, swimmable water everywhere? Are we really going to be okay with just kind of nuking the lake with chemical treatment every year, the first thing in the spring? We have not tried to do that as a staff response, but I think we are planning to come back to you for additional presentation about recommendations around the policy, but that's kind of where we will be going with that discussion.
Okay, very good. Member Risser.
And that makes me reflect on the work session that we had, where those two choices, if council is presented with two things that are really not going to lead to a robust and helpful discussion, it's very challenging. And I believe this was what you referred to as a Hobson's choice. So we need to see something that is more flexible and nuanced, and not get stuck with, council told us to nuke the lakes, or council told us that this was fine.
Thank you for that. Anything else from council members in response to Manager Neal's report? All right. Let's move on then to the consent agenda. There are several items on the consent agenda. I know that Member Jackson wanted to pull item 6L, which is the is that correct? Traffic safety report of September 26, 2023. Does any other member of the council wish to remove an item from the consent agenda? All right. With the exception of item 6L, is there a motion to approve the balance of the items on the consent agenda in a single motion?
So moved. Oh, second.
Member Risser moves, Member Jackson seconds the adoption of the items on the consent agenda in a single motion with the exception of 6L. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption of the motion as stated, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. And then we're on to the traffic safety report, and I'll turn to Member Jackson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to highlight for people, we got a number of emails from folks living at the Grandview Square, and I wanted to let them know immediately that we're going to be installing a warning sign from the eastbound traffic, and I'm really pleased that that was the decision that everybody came to. These stories seem pretty harrowing about the dangers of crossing there. So I just want to let those folks know that we're going to try and fix it, and let us know how it works. So.
I think I'd just like
Dr.
to
Miller,
add
go ahead.
a public service announcement. You can see only 46% of the people push the buttons. 95% of the cars stop when you have the lights flashing. So if you got the opportunities, push the buttons for the rapid flashing beacons. Much safer.
Good. It's a tricky spot over there, especially as you're coming west to east, coming down a little hill and around a curve, and I can see why people get a little bit anxious that aren't 25 anymore, can get across in a hurry. So thanks for doing that. Member Jackson, you care to move the matter?
Yes, I'll move item 6L, please.
All right, Member Jackson moves the adoption of the traffic safety report of September 26, 2023. Is there a second?
Second?
Member Agnew seconds. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption of the traffic safety report of September 26, 2023, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. And now we are on to special recognitions and presentations. We have one item in this category, and Member Risser is going to speak to this item when we finish reading the proclamation. And it is one that we have not done before, and it is a proclamation involving World Day of Remembrance for Road Traffic Victims. And of course, it's dated for November 19, 2023. That is the date for, on a global basis, the Day of Remembrance. Whereas the World Day of Remembrance for Road Traffic Victims, WDOR, is commemorated on the third Sunday of November each year. And whereas it is a high-profile global event to remember the many millions who have been killed and seriously injured on the world's roads and to acknowledge the suffering of all affected victims, families, and communities, millions added each year to countless millions already suffering a truly tremendous cumulative toll. And whereas WDOR has also become an important tool for governments and all those who work involved in crash prevention or response to the aftermath of crashes, since it offers the opportunity to demonstrate the enormous scale and impact of road deaths and injuries, call for an end to the often trivial and inappropriate response to road death and injury, and advocates for future concerted action to stop the carnage. And whereas safe streets and roads contribute to the health, equity, and sustainability of communities by making it possible for people to walk, bike, and safely commute. And whereas from 2019 to 2022, Minnesota experienced a 26% rise in traffic fatalities. In 2019, Minnesota had 364 traffic fatalities, and last year there were 444 fatalities. And whereas in 2022, more than 46,000 people were killed in roadway crashes in the United States, according to the National Safety Council, while this is slight 0.3% decrease from the prior year, in 2021, U.S. traffic deaths reached a 16-year high, the largest annual percentage increase in the nation's reporting history. And whereas the United States ranks the worst among 29 high-income countries analyzed for road safety by the Centers for Disease Control, the population-based death rate in the United States is 11.1 per 100,000 population, which is the highest amongst the 29 high-income countries and 2.3 times the average rate of the 28 other countries that are at 4.8 persons per 100,000. And whereas speeding and other forms of reckless driving put the people who build and repair roads at risk. On World Day of Remembrance, we too pay tribute to the dedicated emergency crews, police and medical professionals who deal daily with the traumatic aftermath of road crashes. Now, therefore, we, the City Council of Edina, Minnesota, do hereby proclaim November 19, 2023 to be World Day of Remembrance for Road Traffic Victims in Edina, and that the City Council of the City of Edina supports the following actions related to WDOR. Number one, remember all people killed and seriously injured on the roads. And number two, acknowledge the crucial work of the emergency services personnel. And number three, draw attention to the generally trivial legal response to culpable road deaths and injuries and advocate for an appropriate serious response. And number four, advocate for better support for road traffic victims and victims' families. And finally, number five, promote evidence-based actions to prevent and eventually stop further road traffic deaths and injuries. Is there a motion to adopt the proclamation?
So moved.
Second.
We got a motion by Member Risser, second by Member Jackson to adopt the World Day of Remembrance for Road Traffic Victims proclamation designating November 19, 2023 as that day of remembrance. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adopting the proclamation say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. Member Risser.
First, I want to thank everybody who put work into this, including Edina staff, and I did have a lot of conversations with Manager Neal and also Jennifer Garsky. I lost a loved one through road traffic violence, and as I look out on this, in this room, I think there are other people who have as well, or who are watching, and who have also experienced it. We have far too much. We don't have to have these crashes if we're more methodical with the way we develop, the way we respond, the way we message and educate. This has been a really challenging year in terms of traffic violence. The Edina community lost many people. The news did cover some of the victims, including 2 Edina Public School graduates, Sabrina Ali, Salma Abdikadir, also Concord Elementary School student Penny Thompson. And so this, I think, is a really important proclamation, and I just want to say thank you to everybody who helped with this. And also, I think about our public works staff. I think about our police, our fire. We need to have people driving and really paying attention, not driving recklessly, not speeding, not doing things that put others in danger. So thank you.
Thank you, Member Risser. All right. Now we're going to move on to public hearing matters. We've got one public hearing matter this evening. It involves an appeal of a decision of the Planning Commission regarding a sign variance for the building that's actually kitty corner from City Hall, Maison Green. And our Assistant City Planner, Emily Boddicker, is going to make the staff presentation. And then the appellant will be presenting, and then there'll also be a response. And so, Ms. Boddicker, go ahead.
One second here.
Can I just ask a quick question? Did you guys vote on the
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've got video.
All right. Thank you, Mayor and members of the City Council. Tonight, the request is to hear an appeal of a sign variance that was granted at 4917 Eden Avenue. The applicant had requested a sign variance for an additional 39.9 square foot wall sign on the south elevation of the building under construction at 4917 Eden Avenue, which is known as Maison Green. The property is located on the east side of Highway 100, south of Eden Avenue, and west of Wilson Road. The Maison Green building is a 7-story apartment building with a restaurant that will be located on the first floor. The site is zoned PUD 21, and signs in the PUD 21 zoning district are regulated by the PCD 1 commercial district for commercial signage and PRD planned residential district for the residential use in the building. The allowed residential signage under the PRD zoning is one wall sign with a maximum size of 12 square feet. The applicant is requesting to add an additional wall sign, or requested from the Planning Commission to add an additional wall sign on the south side of the building that's 39.9 square feet and is also illuminated. The applicant asked for one variance, the variance to allow the additional wall sign for the residential portion of the building. The rest of the proposed signage that's shown in the application meets the other requirements of the city's sign ordinance, and the restaurant space will be allowed signage per the PCD 1 sign code allowances, which is not shown in the application. As you know, certain conditions must be satisfied per Minnesota State Code and the Edina City ordinances for variances to be granted. One of those conditions is that the application relieves practical difficulties that prevent reasonable use. Staff believes that the proposed use is reasonable. The PUD allows for signage that's permitted in the PRD district, and staff believes that the request is reasonable given the site's location on Highway 100. One building sign that's 12 square feet doesn't fit the size and scale of the building given the site location and the height. The previous building on the site, which was Perkins, was a commercial business, and the sign code would have allowed one sign on each elevation of Perkins, so 4 signs, and those 4 signs would be allowed to be up to 15% of the wall that the sign is located on. The second condition is that there are circumstances that are unique to the property. This property is unique in the fact that there are street frontages on 3 sides, and one of those street frontages is Highway 100. The third condition is that the variance will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood. And staff and the Planning Commission believe that granting the variance would not alter the essential character of this neighborhood. The Grandview District has buildings with signage that has similar scale. OLG had received variances for 2 signs, including one 100 square foot illuminated sign that is adjacent to Highway 100. The Planning Commission approved the variance on September 27th with a unanimous vote, and based on the findings that were outlined in their staff report, those being that the practical difficulty is caused by the location of the building. They felt the request was reasonable. They felt that the proposed sign was reasonable given the scale of the building and the number of street frontages, and that there were circumstances that were unique to this property. They also felt that the proposal would not alter the essential character of the neighborhood, and there were other signs in the Grandview District that were similar, and signs that were located on similarly sized buildings. So tonight, council is asked to hold the public hearing and to close the public input period on Sunday, November 12th for action at the next council meeting, Tuesday, November 21st. And with that, I can answer any questions. Otherwise, I can move on. There's another presentation.
All right, thanks, Ms. Boddicker. Questions for Ms. Boddicker? Yes, Member Risser.
When you say this location is unique, and I think about the other multifamily residential properties that we have that are apartments and condominiums, and I go around Edina, I do not see large illuminated signs on them. And so I'm wondering, can you speak to how this is unique and will not trigger multiple requests from places this time? It's not unique in terms of the project we just approved, 5100 Eden Avenue is also that, and then the proposal that, now I can't remember the exact location, but near 169 is also a rental property. We've got the Loden along 169. Are all those sites unique, or are they not? I mean, would they, if they came with an ask and we had approved this, would the same logic be held?
I think each one would be looked at individually. I think this one would be unique based on its proximity to Highway 100 and the elevation change versus where Highway 100 sits versus where the building sits.
It's a very large building. It has an FAR that is far beyond any other structure in this area. It will be casting a shadow on City Hall. It's not hard to miss. So I guess that's something I'm grappling with.
Member Jackson?
Yes, thank you,
Member
Mr.
Risser,
Mayor.
were you finished? Okay.
So, yeah, I was thinking about the Loden as well, and then, so I asked, and there's the senior facilities Rembrandt on the crosstown, and the Heritage, which is also on the crosstown. Do they have signs like this?
They do have signs adjacent to 62.
Okay.
I don't know the square
two on
footages
62
offhand.
Yeah, and Loden does not, but
The Loden has a monument sign next adjacent to Lincoln Drive. They do not have any wall signage.
okay. But the Rembrandt and the Heritage have signs that are comparable to this sign?
Yes.
Okay.
And I will point out that the PUD is written so that the signage allowances for each of those residential buildings, even though they are residential buildings, may have different signage allowances.
In the PUD?
Yep, based on the PUD or based on the zoning.
Okay. Are they lit?
This proposed sign?
No, the ones on 62.
I don't know offhand if either of those are illuminated.
Tony, I don't believe they are,
Okay.
but I'm not 100% sure.
Would it be within our power to allow the sign but not the illumination?
I think you certainly could add that as a condition, yes.
Okay. And then I'll just make the plug again. If we had a uniform sign ordinance on 100, we wouldn't be having this discussion. And I'm disappointed the Planning Commission has not taken that up. It seems like a fairly simple matter, but it's 2 years I've been asking for that. So those are my questions. Thank you.
Anything further? At this point, yes, Member Risser, back to you.
As we frame our dialogue, I do want to note that we do need to talk about the type of building. It's a home, it's a rental, it's an apartment. So, but the Planning Commission, when you listen to the dialogue that they had, it was noted that this is a lot about branding and advertising. And so another big question I have is this just a simple variance request so that you can have a second larger sign and we're dealing with a physical change and only a physical change? Or is this a policy change and we're dealing with a different kind of function? Because if you live in the building, you know how to get there. The large majority of trips going to and from the building are going to be by residents. And so that is a concern to me. And so I am also concerned that this did not originally come to City Council and it took a resident coming forward and having to do a petition. It doesn't seem like it meets the variance standards, which are just for physical change. It seems like it it has to do with function.
So part of your question, Member Risser, is that whether or not this has precedential value somewhere else?
It is, and also, does this open the door for, well, it's on 66th Street, it's on France Avenue, it's on York. They need to have an illuminated sign. And then suddenly we've got all these illuminated signs all over Edina for rental developments.
Let's ask the city attorney for a request of this type, for a variance request for wall signage. Does a request for a variance in this situation create any kind of a precedent?
Mayor, each one has to be evaluated individually on its own merits. So I'm sure probably applicants would probably point to past practices, but that can't be the controlling factor. It also has to be the individual analysis of each individual application.
Regardless of whether it's signage or something else, a request for a variance is specific in nature and doesn't create any precedential value.
Correct. You are not bound by decisions made on prior variances. You have to evaluate each application individually.
All right. Thank you. Other questions now for Ms. Boddicker? All right. We've got some other folks here. We've got the appellant, Mr. Tessman. And I see that, Ms. Boddicker, you've advised Mr. Tessman he's going to have about 10 minutes to make his presentation. So maybe it's his wife, maybe it's a neighbor with him. We'll find out. Certainly they've probably been thinking about time management, but we'll work it out.
Share this.
And do you need to have the overhead projector working, or does your computer need to be hooked up to?
No.
I was just going to read this because our printer ran out of ink. So I have to read my notes. So,
okay, so let's start out by having both of you introduce yourselves and give us your home address, and then
yes, absolutely.
We'll get into the content of your appeal.
And thank you so much, Mayor Hovland and City Council members and distinguished members for having us here. We'll introduce ourselves. We're going to, as a team. So, Tom?
Tom Tessman. I live at 5017 Yvonne Terrace, Edina.
And I am Diane Blake. I'm a resident of Edina. I also live at 5017 Yvonne Terrace, which is in the Melody Lake neighborhood. And just to give you just a little bit of background briefly, we are not only residents, but also we are committed and engaged members of the Edina community. We raised our daughter here. She's a senior in college, ready to fly, hopefully next May. We have also served a number of different Edina organizations, from Edina Early Childhood Family Education to the Edina League of Women Voters. And Tom here is a commissioner on the Edina Energy and Environment Commission. So we are offering a perspective that is, as residents of the Melody Lake, a kind of attached Grandview district, that seemed to be lacking from the commission group that worked on it. We are residents of the area, so we have lived there a while. We work there. We bank at Wells Fargo. We go to the Hilltop. We walk there for lots of dinners and drinks. So we're embedded into the community, and we wanted to offer our perspective. We certainly don't speak for the neighborhood, but we speak from our experience and as residents of that neighborhood. So, what? You advanced it? Oh, okay. All right. So, I'd also like to point out we are not lawyers, and we are not, so if I screw up a little bit on some of the interpretations, please forgive me and bear with me. So the question at hand is, does the Maison Green apartment complex sign variance meet Minnesota statute requirements of city code variances? We argue that it does not. Thanks. All right. So as we understand it, the Minnesota statute says that the city of Edina must prove some kind of practical difficulty with its code in order to grant the variance. So the state of Minnesota provides a statute, a 3-factor test to prove and demonstrate practical difficulties. And the code that they use, they have a standard of reasonableness, uniqueness, and essential character. Which button? This one? Okay. So the question is, what are the practical difficulties that have been claimed? Well, the argument is that the practical difficulty is caused by the location of the building on a freeway, namely Highway 100. Right? So if we apply the standard of reasonableness to this, and we look at the claim that without the signage, the building might not be recognized as the destination, and also given the number of street frontages that the building is on. So we would argue and say, wow, the scale's big, guys. It's 7.5 stories. I can see it from 62, okay? It's big. No proposed sign on the north side. So I thought that was kind of interesting because it goes to reason that if you need a sign for people traveling north, right, so they can find their destination, it stands to reason, boy, we should have one on the north side for people traveling south. Makes sense to me, all right? But yet there is no request for a sign on the north side for south traveling residents or travelers. The other point is how is it that after all these years we have a number of residents and guests that are able to find and locate other buildings off of 100? We have the community center, we have City Hall, right? And then finally, we are all familiar with GPS today, and most people know how to use it. The second test, if we look at it, is uniqueness. Now, the property is, what's being claimed is the property is unique due to its location on an elevation change from Highway 100, in addition to the number of street frontages. So we would argue that the property does not seem to be unique. Unique, as we interpret it, means one of a kind. And this is definitely not one of a kind. There are multiple buildings, whether they are apartments or condos or commercial, that are on 2, 3, and 4 streets in this Grandview area. The other one is that the idea that directional wayfinding as a signage really does not fulfill uniqueness criteria. Now I will turn it over to Tom.
Thanks, Diane. The third test to grant the variance is around essential character. The claim is the signage would not alter the essential character of the neighborhood because the Grandview District has buildings with signage of similar scale. As we look around our specific Grandview neighborhood, there are currently many multi-story residential buildings that do not have secondary wayfinding signs. There are also many new multi-unit residential buildings in the works too, like the senior co-op, the Kuman redevelopment. So there's some others that will be entering this area as well. Secondly, as we look at the Maison Green and certainly the Melody Lake residents, we believe that they will be subjected to this illumination sign 24/7. It's not going away. And just to further demonstrate some of these points, we wanted to show a few visuals. Here's a City Hall where we are tonight. People are able to find it. It has 3 roads around it, including 2 roundabouts. It's directly across from Maison Green, which has been noted. People know how to get to City Hall. This is the executive building that's been in place for 42 years adjacent to Maison Green. They have one modest sign, the Edina Executive Plaza. That's it. The next visual is for Avador. The Avador went in the summer of 2019, multi-unit apartment building. It works and coincides with the one sign for Avador. It too has 3 roads around it. It has Brookview, it has Eden Avenue, and I believe it has Vernon. This is the other unit in the neighborhood. This is the Grandview Square condominium complex. It's been around for 23 years now. The one sign they have on this building identifying it actually faces west as you enter into the complex, and that's it. We took this photo today. We've seen visuals. We kind of know where the sign is proposed to go up near the top. What we pointed out, what we found of interest were the fact that there are many, many balconies facing south coming out of this property. Perhaps the applicant could explain, but we're wondering how on earth those folks will not be negatively impacted by a large illuminated sign projecting in the evening. And the next slide. we took this today. This is from the corner of our street in the Melody Lake area, looking to the north. It's very easy to see this building. You can see the sidewalk. We bike and we walk and we drive down this road every day. So we are of the strong belief that, yes, in fact, this large illuminated sign will alter the character of the neighborhood, and we are strongly opposed against it. So just in summary, from our perspective, we believe the variance requirements have not been met for reasonableness, uniqueness, and essential character. Moreover, an additional big-scale illuminated sign like this, as was discussed previously, we believe this is an outlier. This does break precedent, and I think sets up potential issues in the future very quickly for some of the other larger-scale buildings that are moving into this Grandview neighborhood. And last but not least, I'm fond of the Edina Climate Action Plan. We're trying to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 45% in the year 2030. I don't think we should necessarily be approving activities like LED lighting, which actually increase greenhouse gases moving forward. So that's it. Thank you very much. We hope you buy our argument and vote no.
All right, thank you, Mr. Tessman. Let's see if anybody on the council has questions for either you, Ms. Wright. Anybody? Okay, good. Very thorough presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now we'll invite Ms. Boddicker. Did you have a sequence here? You have Mr. Bowman is here representing the building, I take it?
Yeah, good evening, Bjorn. Is this working? Bjorn Bowman with Sarah Graphics, representing the sign company and also the developer who's we're contracted with. So happy to answer any questions.
Give us your business address too, would you, Mr. Bowman?
Yeah, I'll have to look here. Give me a second.
Who do you work for?
Sarah Graphics. It's the name of the sign company.
All right.
It is 2401 Nevada Avenue North, Minneapolis, Minnesota 55427.
Would you spell the name of the company you work for, please?
Yep. SERIGRAPHICS.
All right. Thank you. All right. Go ahead. Tell us why you think that you need this sign.
Yeah, just to follow up on Emily's presentation, I don't necessarily have anything further to add. Is one thing that I feel I don't live in Edina, so coming here, I've been to City Council. I think it's the third time. This is the first time at night. I did not have an easy time finding it, and that building is not easily seen at night. And to the scale of this sign is shown in our presentation, is very understated. And one aspect of the sign, of the illumination piece, is the only thing that would light at night is the copy. The resounding rectangle and background would be opaque. So any of the residents that would live in that balcony next to the sign itself, there would be no light pollution per se or anything. The light would be coming directly out of the cabinet through the letters, so there's nothing spilling out to the left or right or to the top or the bottom. So it's a very focused illumination. Yeah. And yeah, exactly. And also, as far as the scale of the sign within the overall size of the building, it's very, as you can see, appropriate, and it's not an overly large sign.
So I think we get the idea that you're the representative of the sign company that's building the sign to put on this building, but you don't have anything to do with the ownership of the building, do you?
I do not, no.
Okay. we have anybody here from the ownership group of the building that wants to tell us why they think they need this sign? I understand what the sign company would like to do. It's a nice sale, but it doesn't have anything to do with meeting the requirements of the variance. That's what we want to hear from the owner on. So because the owner's not here tonight, I think you better tell the owner we're going to probably hold this matter open until November 12th, as you request. I'm assuming that our council will do that, and they better put some information in writing to the council as to why they think they need this sign variance and why they meet the standards of reasonableness, uniqueness, and essential character, so that we can better understand what their position is on this. Member Risser?
To our overall process and protocol, this is a first for me, but I am new to council. But for a vendor to come forward requesting a variance or anything on behalf of a development and not be the developer, I think is really problematic. And if we don't have any kind of language in our screening process that would stop this from happening, I think we need to put it in. Because we could have vendors coming forward with all kinds of ideas for developments that might not actually be, something that the developer actually wants.
I think that we would, but on the other hand, we would take testimony from anybody on a particular public hearing matter, so it wouldn't matter if they were a vendor or not, but it is influencing that the owner isn't here to stand behind their request for a variance, and instead has sent the as you point out, the vendor.
Have they sent the vendor?
I will clarify that the ownership of the building has to sign off on a variance application, so they have signed the application, are aware of the request tonight.
Okay, good to know.
Yeah, well, it's good that they were aware of it, yeah. But they're not here, so.
We do advise them that that's at their peril, right? So they can send.
Right, I'm not trying to lay this off on you, Mr. Bowman.
No, I understand.
I mean, I get why you're here, or why it's a good-looking sign. Member Agnew.
Thank you. So I'm in our packet, and it's page 351, but it shows really it's probably one of the diagrams that you put together, shows the overall height, mentions that there's low voltage wire, access to remote power supply, kind of all of that instruction on how it will work. And so looking at this, it makes me curious, is there the ability to fluctuate the voltage within the sign once installed? If it were too bright, could it be dimmed down?
Yes, there is a power supply which we can control the lumens, or which is the brightness, for lack of a better term, in the LED. So yes, that is absolutely can be achieved.
That was a great question. So we got the right person here for that.
Good for something.
To talk about the level of illumination that
Yes.
So.
And even to that point, the softness of the white of the LED itself. So there's LED that tend to be a little more stark, bright, almost blue, versus a soft white, like any light bulb you go into your Home Depot store or whatever. There's also that ability to control the softness of the light as well.
Okay.
And to follow on that, could we control the hours of the illumination?
Yes, absolutely, and most likely this will be on a timer to go with some of the accent lighting in the building, but it can also be wired in its own circuit, so that a timer can be, from X time to X time can be controlled. So yes.
Thank you. And then maybe one final question. It appears that this visual that we're seeing probably has some type of dark overlay, which may be toning down the starkness of the brightness of the sign. Being the sign creator, how would you compare the brightness of this sign to the brightness that could be coming from any window within the apartment complex?
That's a good question. I would argue, or not argue, but it would be, so right now there's a similar type of construction sign on the crane for this actual building. I don't know, when you leave here tonight, you'll see that. The one difference is the background of that sign is is all white, and the copy is so it's basically a reverse of what you're looking at here. So I would argue that it would be comparable to having an apartment light on. So and if, again, by being able to control the brightness of this, we can tone up or down as necessary to kind of accommodate if it's an overpowering light for either the neighbor or the surrounding community. So
Thank you so much. That's it.
Prompt other questions, Member Jackson.
Yes, I have actually a question for Ms. Boddicker. I'm looking at my packet here. It says public input on Better Together. I clicked on that and didn't see anything. Was there any comments on Better Together?
There was not.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Yeah, thanks, Mr. Bowman. This is
Yes,
a public
thank you.
hearing matter. I'm going to open this up now for testimony from the general public. Anyone in the audience that wishes to come forward and testify, you'll have 3 minutes to testify. And then we'll go to any online participants we might have to have them testify. And then, as Ms. Boddicker has requested and has been our practice, we'll leave this matter open until November 12th, 2023, I suspect, and continue the action to our next city council meeting, where we will actually make the decision on November 21st. Anyone in the audience wish to come forward and testify regarding this matter? Ms. Weston, welcome back.
Hello, Janie Weston, is this on?
Doesn't sound like it's on.
No. Oh, now it is. 6136 Brookview Avenue. The sign's not that big, but it is lit. There will be, in the future, 2 more quite large apartment condo buildings right across Highway 100. And if you have a bedroom window in your apartment that faces Highway 100, you're going to see that light every single night. And toning it down at night is an interesting idea. If it could be barely glowing, that's better than nothing. But there are future residents that will be right across the highway and closer to eye level to that sign. So keep that in mind. And I appreciate that scrutinizing why or the conditions for granting a variance really need to be regarded very carefully here. Because who knows, the next taller building, oh, we got to have a sign on this side and we want it also on that side and that side. Where are we going to stop here? We have enough light pollution as it is. And this brings to mind the Millennium with their strings of very bright LED lights that go up one side and way down and all over the place. And how did that get approval to be? They are quite bright if you're driving past there at night. Maybe it's a safety issue, so a helicopter coming into the hospital helipad won't hit that building because the Millennium is also quite tall, but I don't think that's why they're there. It's, look at me, here I am. And frankly, I'd like to see lights put downward and not glowing out this way, and certainly not going up. We've got enough light pollution, and it's hard enough to see the stars as it is. So, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Weston. Anyone else in the audience? All right, let's turn now to Director Benrod to see if we have anybody waiting online that wishes to testify.
I have multiple callers on the line, but none of them have yet signaled their desire to speak. Callers, as a reminder, if you would like to testify in this public hearing, please press *1 on your telephone keypad. That's the asterisk symbol, then the number 1. I have one. Operator, will you please unmute the line of our first caller? And caller, please begin by stating your full name and address for the record. Go ahead, caller.
Hi, everybody. My name is Daniel Eaton, 5712 Parkwood Lane. I want to first and foremost say hi to council and to the mayor and to our city manager. Want to comment on the issue at hand regarding this sign variance, and would like to first and foremost echo the really nice presentation that my neighbors in person just gave and really outlined, I think, some very valuable criteria for how we should be thinking about variances. Probably some of the best analysis that I've heard in a long time for how we should think about a variance. I think it's pretty clear. This doesn't meet the test of a variance. And I also think, as you think about the future, these actions do set precedents in the future for these types of requests and expectation that they'll also be granted a variance. And if they're not granted a variance, if we grant this one, why would we not grant future variances? Where is the equity in the decision making? More importantly, what is the process that we're following in order to make these types of variance decisions? What is the criteria? I think my neighbors in person who laid out their case and the criteria have very clear criteria that they laid out. And I think those are the types of tests that we as residents should expect, and hopefully council should expect, as we think about a variance coming to or coming up for our comment. The fact that this has come up and the fact that we kind of hear a little bit more about it tonight, and it feels very, very clear that it doesn't meet these tests, it does start to feel like, where did the process go awry? I would say, what is the process? I would love to know next time that we have a city council meeting. I would love to hear what is the process that the staff is using in order to vet these variances. And, transparency is our biggest issue right now as a society, as a city. Transparency will help to breed a culture of trust. And I think the residents want to trust that what is being put before them has been vetted equitably in a clear process, clear criteria for variances, both zoning and ordinances, would help to build that trust. So please vote no, council, and thank you very much for your time tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Eden.
Operator, please unmute the line of our second caller, and caller, please begin by stating your full name and address for the record.
My name is Susan Lee. I reside at 6708 Point Drive. It is the duty of the city's planning staff to first and foremost enforce the current city zoning ordinances. When staff prepares a report for our volunteer boards and commissions, diligence must be used to provide a complete disclosure of the full meaning of the ordinance and of the requirements to enforce the current zoning. A variance is a serious matter because it can expose the city to setting a future precedent for even more variances to follow. Edina Zoning Code Chapter 36, Article 13, titled Signs, states that, quote, "The purpose of this article is to protect and promote the general welfare, health, safety, and order within the city through the establishment of a comprehensive and impartial series of standards, regulations, and procedures governing the erection, use, and display of devices, signs, or symbols." It goes on to further emphasize that Article 13 is intended to, quote, ensure that the public is not endangered, annoyed, or distracted by the unsafe, disorderly, indiscriminate, or unnecessary use of such communicative facilities. No illuminated signs for multifamily residential towers have previously been permitted. None of the following multi-story residential buildings have such signage today: Point of France, Aria, 1 Southdale Place, Onyx, The Bower, Avidor, and others. The closest analogy would be the Westin Hotel, which embodies all of the reasons why towers in Edina should not be permitted to have illuminated signage visible at night at the top of the building. The illuminated Westin sign can be seen more than a mile away, visible to the entire Cornelia neighborhood to the west and the City of Richfield residential neighborhoods to the east. Because the Maison Green building is literally located at the highest point on Highway 100, this illuminated sign will be visible at night to the low-rise single-family neighborhoods west of Highway 100, including Melody Lake, Birchcrest, and those southeast of 100, Gulf Terrace Heights, and the Concord neighborhood. How does this correlate with, quote, ensuring that the public is not annoyed or distracted by the indiscriminate or unnecessary use of signs? The findings in the staff report cite the location of the building on Highway 100 as the source of the practical difficulty. There is simply no difficulty in being located at the top of a hill, completely unblocked by any other structures. The request was found to be reasonable, with the implication that those on a highway are looking around for building signage. As we all know, GPS mapping is ubiquitous in cars and cell phone apps.
Ms. Lee, I hate to interrupt you, but you're well over the 3-minute mark. If you could wrap up your comments, it would be appreciated, or submit them. It sounds like you have some real good written material there. If you could submit them to the city, that would be helpful. But would you please wrap up your comment now?
The size of the sign is not reasonable given that it will be illuminated and have an unobstructed clear path of viewing towards many key residential areas due to its enormous height. I ask that the council respond affirmatively to this appeal request and overturn the granting of the variance. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lee. And please send in your written material. Anyone else? Okay. All right. The request of staff in this matter is that we close the public hearing on November 12, 2023 and continue the matter for action to the November 21, 2023 meeting. Is there a motion to that effect?
So moved.
A second.
Member Jackson moves, Member Agnew seconds. The motion is stated. Any further discussion? All those in favor of closing the public hearing on this matter on November 12, 2023 and continuing the action on the matter to our November 21, 2023 meeting, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. All right, very good. Thank you, folks, for participating in this. All right, we're going to move on now to the reports and recommendations portion of the agenda. The first item we have there is one that we have usually every couple of weeks. There are people and organizations donating something to the city that requires that the council approve on a supermajority basis those gifts. The donations this reporting period are embodied in Resolution 2023-81, which would accept certain donations designated in that resolution on behalf of the city of Edina. Is there anybody who cares to move the adoption of Resolution 2023-81?
So moved.
Second.
Member Jackson moves, Member Agnew seconds the adoption of Resolution 2023-81. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption of Resolution 2023-81 say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. Resolution 2023-81 is adopted. For folks in the audience, you'll be able to see the donors' names on our website. They'll be posted. There's a couple of different categories of gifts this reporting period. To the Park and Rec Department, Tony Giannakakis, thank you, of TC Home Builders, a $700 donation for a tree in Highlands Park. Tony, I'm sorry I messed up your beautiful Greek name there. Andrew Brandt, another tree at St. John's Park, another generous donation. And then there were some in-kind donations and gift certificates at the Senior Center for Malina Health and Walker Methodist and Wooden Hill Brewery. So thanks to all those organizations as well. That takes us next to
Ernie Rose Golf.
this one?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, thanks. The Ernie Rose Golf Indoor Facility also was a donor for 2 golf lesson gift certificates. Thank you for that. And thank you, Ernie Rose. And now we're going to move on to a sketch plan review we have for 6600, 6800 France Avenue. And Director Teague has the introduction on this matter, and then we're going to hear from the proposed applicant.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, members of the council. So the Wildermere, Olympus, and HGA Architects team is here to present a sketch plan for, this is the Southdale Office Center site, 6600 through 6800 France, the 22-acre site. They did, about a month and a half ago, go to Planning Commission with 2 options for a sketch plan. One utilizing, the current site is currently zoned PUD for a specific plan that has not been developed back in, the original plan was approved back in 2017. They presented those 2 plans to the Planning Commission, and based on the feedback that was given at the Planning Commission, they've made some revisions to address some of their issues. So what they're asking for is review of the revised plans that are in the packet. And that is a plan that would rezone the site back to the original zoning of planned office district and basically rescind or give up on that plan that wasn't financially possible. So some of the detail of this project, it would be to remove those middle buildings on the site and construct a 3 to 4 story, 85,000 square foot medical office building and an 8,500 square foot restaurant. They have stated that with a formal application, the plans would be code compliant with the POD, Planned Office District standards. Some of that detail gets fleshed out as part of a formal application. It does appear that the site plan is code compliant in terms of setback. So with that, I will introduce the team. I'm not sure who all is exactly going to speak, but I will open up their presentation and they'll present the detail.
Mayor Hovland, council members, city manager, city attorney, and planning staff, thank you for allowing us time tonight to present our proposed project. My name is Sean Smith. I'm with Wildermere, and I'm a member of the project team at Southdale Office Partners. I am here tonight with the rest of the team, Jason Vanslow with HGA, David Little is also here from HGA, Brian Hobbins as well from Olympus Ventures. They are our partner on this project. Tom Lincoln with Kimley Horn, the civil designer, he was also supposed to be here tonight, but got that nasty fall cold, and so told him to stay home. I've had the pleasure of working on this project since 2008. And in 2014, Wildermere moved their offices to this site. And shortly after, in 2017, Olympus Ventures moved their office as well. Many of our staff live in this community, and collectively, we are excited to propose this new 3-story, 85,000 square foot medical office building and a separate 8,500 square foot restaurant building and a supporting parking structure that will replace 3 functionally irrelevant buildings that are over 60 years old. While the proposed project is very similar to that of Phase 4 in our 2017 PUD entitlement, ownership was encouraged by Edina planning staff to instead present this project under the site's former zoning designations of Planned Office District, or POD, and thus the need for your review and approval. Our sketch plan to the Planning Commission included two options, and after careful regard for their comments, dialogue with staff, engagement with the neighborhood, and additional consideration of the challenges of building the PUD against a collection of constraints and stakeholder concerns, we also determined that the best course would be a reversion back to the POD designation. Please note that our proposed design is intended to create a medical building and not a typical office building. This project is in support of the City of Edina goals and Edina Chamber goals to establish this portion of France Avenue as a medical destination. And we experienced this at 6600 building in particular, and we realized the need for a new best-in-class building that can accommodate today's medical office requirements. These are things like access to grade, proximate, and covered parking options, internal site access to building amenities, greater building depth for medical design, greater plumbing and electrical infrastructure for things like wash sinks, lab work procedures, high-powered medical equipment, modernized mechanical equipment that is sensitive to temperature and humidity, and as well as filtration to reduce the risk of airborne illnesses. Beyond these market factors, our site is unique in its overall size and particular inherent constraints and challenges. These are things like honoring the commitments of the existing tenants and acknowledging the remaining value of the other remodeled buildings, maintaining key sight lines to these structures, and accounting for the easements on the parcel, and addressing some high water tables, and also seeking to maintain the existing tree growth as much as possible. The outcome of this project will be a POD application to build a new medical office building, and ownership not only intends to conform to the POD zoning ordinance, but also to incorporate the city and constituency feedback from prior PUD submittals in support of its goal of offering neighborhood and area-wide amenities that enhance this existing 1970s office park. This project will greatly improve site connectivity, sustainability, and will also incorporate Southdale area design and experience guidelines in a way that also respects the existing constraints and the patient-centered requirements of our medical users that are ultimately demanding this building. This project sets a new vision in what we believe will become a gateway project for the South France Avenue corridor, increasing medical access while welcoming employees, residents, and visitors to the Southdale neighborhood. This slide here that Jason's put up, this is a general overview of the site and the existing conditions. You can see that the site is currently made up of 6 separate buildings, and on to the left is the separate Bank of America building. That's a separate parcel, and it also has separate easement rights to that parcel as well. The blue dotted line also, this indicates the current connections in the building, which are a very important part of our existing campus and how tenants use this building. The project that we are proposing would be replacing the 6700 building, the 6750 building, and the 6740 building, and those are all in the middle of the site. The existing 6800 building and 6600 buildings, those are shaded in orange. Those would stay. We have recently invested in approximately $10 million in the last few years to these two buildings alone. We feel that there's a lot of relevance and upgrades that have enhanced some of the sustainability and community benefits in these buildings as well. Along this, there are parking counts that are in each sections of the building in gray boxes. A point of reference here is that this site is currently properly balanced in reference to its use, density, and parking requirements. We are required to have 1,420 stalls and are providing just under 1,600. I also want to note that it is only because of the recent change in the zoning ordinance that reduced the parking density do we find ourselves with approximately 150 surplus stalls, where just recently in 2019 for the Bank of America approval, we were required to request a variance for parking on shortage of stalls. The existing leases in this building reflect that prior ordinance requirement of 1 per 250 square feet. Slide 6. This is another plan view of our prior slide, and this should help orient you to the next several slides that will outline site constraints and the redevelopment potential. So the opening remarks in the project narrative mention the challenges that the existing constraints that make our site unique that need to be accommodated during the rezoning. There are currently 23 PUDs in the city of Edina, and we understand from staff that our site is either one of or the largest PUD. It is also one of the only PUDs that seek to retain existing buildings on the site, and it was designed to be done in 6 separate phases. I want to emphasize the value of maintaining the existing 66 and 6800 structures. Those buildings have recently received over $10 million in reinvestment, and by retaining these buildings, we also retain the 75 existing Edina businesses that operate out of our site and depend on the services that we provide so that they can continue to serve the residents of Edina. If you look at the 6600 building, this building has approximately 30 tenants in it, and per code it is required to have about 600 stalls. So all of the parking areas that you see currently outside of that building around 6600 building are required for this building. The 6800 building is similar in that it has 40 tenants and it requires just under 500 stalls. This is essentially the entire south lots adjacent to the building. Tavern on France, which is that 6740 building, that requires 76 stalls, and those stalls are used just on that smaller lot just south of the building. Together, these buildings make up approximately 350,000 square feet that will remain on the site, and they will utilize most of the existing parking that you will see today. Second, we need to maintain the site's internal connections. The internal connections provide all-weather access to our tenants and guests to navigate the buildings. Sheltered connectivity is of particular importance for medical office properties, where the elderly, sick, and disabled guests may wish to access other parts of the building, either as part of the continuum of care or access to the common area amenities through the course of their stay. And sometimes these can be for lengthy exams or treatments. Similarly, there are certain amenities that the tenants of our buildings are shared amongst the various buildings. In the 6600 building, there's a fitness center, for example. There's also conference rooms. In the 6800 building, we have food service, conference rooms, and just public seating and meeting spaces. The internal site connectivity provides for the distribution of services like gas, telecom, and electrical utilities. There are certain easements that service the buildings as a campus. Mainly, these are distributed through the 6700 building and are designed for the continued service throughout each of the 6600 building and the 6800 building. You can see on that site there's a electrical easement that runs through the building and a telecom easement that runs from France Avenue through that building. And then on the south portion, I had mentioned this before, but the Bank of America buildings require certain easements for these services and access. The linkways are climate controlled and they're used year-round, and they act as an amenity in themselves for the employees of that building. As you walk through that building, a lot of people will take phone calls or just simply get their steps in. These shelter linkages are also a defining feature and market differentiator for attracting medical and professional service firms to the city of Edina, as opposed to neighboring cities, for example, that have single-site buildings that don't have these amenities, and there are a lot of those that exist on the 494 corridor. At the same time, the 3 60-year-old, mostly vacant buildings being proposed for demolition make the way for a new linking building proposed by this project. These current buildings that are on site are functionally obsolete for new medical users, and they're irrelevant for today's office market. The layout of these buildings and the existing design are physical and economic barriers to achieving the objectives that are outlined not only by the city, but also the narrative that we've included in this presentation. They're difficult to access with many landings at the top of challenging staircases. They're also energy efficient with poor cladding, non-insulated glass, and dated mechanical systems. There's also 2 high water tables that we've identified after our 2017 PUD approval, which makes it really challenging and, if not economically infeasible, to build the required underground parking that is outlined in that plan. And as part of our $10 million improvements, about $3 million of that went into to reorient the access of the 6800 building. One of the dated features is there's currently only one ADA access to this site, and that's accessing it off of Valley View Drive and into the 6700 building. And so we've reoriented the 6800 building access to provide greater ADA access and wayfinding to the building. And it's important to maintain this view to that corridor and access to the building. All of these constraints are the drivers for us needing to start at this particular location on the site, as opposed to, say, the north or the south parking lots, which many stakeholders have suggested to us in our meetings. In addition to those internal constraints that I've outlined on the prior slide, this slide really depicts the additional external constraints that we are trying to accommodate, and is the reason for the design that we are presenting tonight. Along with the existing 6600 building and 6800 buildings, and maintaining these internal connections, we've heard from a lot of stakeholders about the importance of the existing tree grove to the west. There's also a desire to create a north-south connectivity on the site, and as you can see, that currently does not exist. You either have to access on Valley View or on France Avenue. And there is a desire for a deep setback on France Avenue to create areas for the public realm. And this site, you can see the result of trying to accommodate this feedback. We are left with a rather small box to work with on what otherwise is a large site. And with these constraints properly identified, HGA will now get into the design of our project, which will deliver a roughly $50 to $60 million investment for the Southdale neighborhood.
Thanks, Sean.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Smith. Yes, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. First off, I want to thank you all very much for giving us all the opportunity to speak with you today. My name is Jason Vanslow. I'm an architect with HGA Architects and Engineers, and I've really had the pleasure of working with Wildermere and Olympus Ventures on this project since early 2019. So a lot of background. I've seen a lot of iterations go on this site, understand it from a pretty complex level. The site plan being presented is really the result of years of working with a development partner to revitalize a cornerstone site within the Greater Southdale District. As Sean mentioned, there are a lot of forces acting on the site that have helped to inform this plan, including the desire to create a connected, cohesive campus of buildings and to build on the work that has been invested in keeping 6600 and 6800 as viable, thriving properties. It is also driven by an understanding of the existing natural amenities on the site, a sensitivity to the adjacent Cornelia neighborhood and the needs of its residents, the need to meet zoning and tenant requirements when it comes to parking in a way that accounts for the current, proposed, and anticipated future uses of the site, and a recognition of the vision and spirit of the Greater Southdale Design Guidelines. Critical to this development is an acknowledgement of the needs of the immediate and broader community, namely the preservation of existing natural site amenities as well as creating and enhancing community connections. The way we see it, this site really serves two populations: the remote user coming to the campus to benefit from increased health and wellness facilities, and the local residents who use the site to connect to the broader community. The new buildings on the site are positioned to maintain and enhance these needs through several intentional design decisions. First, through that creation of a mid-block north-south connector, which to our understanding has been desired by the city to help with wayfinding and internal navigation throughout this 22-acre site. Next, positioning the building to allow for a better distribution of required parking on site and the creation of a more pedestrian-friendly parking experience along France Avenue versus the contiguous multi-bay surface lot that exists today. Additionally, this connector and associated parking has been set back off the east property line to support the spirit of the Greater Southdale Design Guidelines and the desire for a boulevard-style design to help enhance the pedestrian experience and buffer internal users from traffic along France Avenue. Importantly, this design also eliminates the right-out exit onto France Avenue, an improvement that will make this a much more pedestrian-friendly and environmentally enhanced parking area than what exists today. Massing of that west parking structure has also been thoroughly studied in order to respect the presence of the existing mature tree grove while also respecting the adjacent neighborhood by minimizing the structure's height and frontage along Valley View Road. It has also been designed to allow pedestrians from the Lake Cornelia neighborhood access to two walking paths that will create east-west walkability across the site. Separation of the restaurant structure further reinforces a breaking down of the scale of the buildings on the site, as well as creating opportunity for pedestrian street rooms that better the overall pedestrian experience. And finally, building placement that supports mid-block pedestrian connections between Cornelia neighborhood and the Greater Southdale Business District in both the north-south and east-west directions. We'll highlight these improved pedestrian experiences and the breaking up of the massing into street rooms in an upcoming slide to better illustrate this intent. If you want to jump to 10. Perfect. While the previous slide we spoke conceptually to the building placement and pedestrian experience, this slide takes a deeper look at the metrics of the new site layout. As we can see in these metrics, the new medical office building at 85,000 square feet and restaurant at 8,500 square feet require 325 stalls per code. In addition to these parking requirements, due to the removal of the multi-bay contiguous lot along France Avenue, we need to ensure we still meet the requirements of the existing buildings that are to remain on the site as well. Building off what Sean mentioned earlier, the distribution of parking is such that surface parking and under-building parking on the south end of the site serve the 6800 building, surface parking and under-building parking on the north end of the site serve the 6600 building, and the newly oriented surface and structured parking at the center of the site will serve the new medical office building and restaurant. Additionally, this parking design seeks to solve today for anticipated future uses of the site, which, although not defined today, will certainly require additional parking. Also, as mentioned on the previous slide, the building placement and parking arrangement shown support the Greater Southdale Design Guidelines goals of an overall reduction in scale of the site to reflect a 200-foot grid in order to generate a more engaging public realm and opportunities for better community experience. So this next slide is the one I had highlighted previously. We are stating that the building placement and parking organization allow for a hierarchy of various connections throughout the site with an increased emphasis on the pedestrian experience. From a pedestrian standpoint, there's a priority placed on the two east-west connections to the site, linking Cornelia neighborhood to the Greater Southdale Business District. From a vehicular standpoint, the placement of the new medical office building supports a pedestrian-friendly north-south vehicular connection, which is a direct response to comments we've heard from the city, neighborhood, and priorities of the Greater Southdale Design Guidelines. The removal of the multi-bay contiguous parking lot on the east of the property and intentional setback of the new pedestrian-friendly vehicular connection again offers a buffered boulevard experience for pedestrians along France Avenue. I'll repeat here as well, the elimination of the right out along France Avenue meets the goals of the city and county for enhancing car safety while also better serving the pedestrians traversing the site along the north-south sidewalks of France Avenue. So here again, we wanted to emphasize the public benefits we believe this redevelopment will bring to the community, as well as to highlight the aspects of the Greater Southdale Design Guidelines we've looked to incorporate. I'm not going to read through all these, but as an overview, this proposal addresses matters such as a better understanding of the existing natural amenities on the site, a sensitivity to the adjacent Cornelia neighborhood and the needs of its residents, a breakdown of both the building and campus to a more pedestrian-friendly scale, and an acknowledgement of the vision and spirit of the Greater Southdale Design Guidelines and feedback from the city architect. Particularly, an improved pedestrian experience, a breaking up of that site massing, as well as building design and material selections that are informed by the Greater Southdale Design Guidelines. All of these have been key factors in driving the development of the site plan that you see before you today. So this next slide, this is a table that shows the program tracker which we've been using to calculate both the required parking and FAR for the project. As you can see, the current site plan represents a FAR of 0.46, which fits within the POD zoning requirements of 0.5. Additionally, this table shows code-required parking for the entire site, along with parking provided within the current plan, which seeks to address current, proposed, and future parking needs. On a related note, I want to point out the density the developer is giving up with this revised plan, which adds up to just under 450,000 square feet of building entitlements as compared to the 2017 PUD. This concession, likely worth significant dollars to the developer, was made in respect to community feedback. It also illustrates that in the long run, we know the city wants greater density on this site, thus the planning ahead for additional parking so that those future needs can be accommodated when the time is right. So this next slide helps to illustrate the general building masses, but also illustrates the goal of preserving the majority of the mature tree grove, and provide continued tree buffer to the west in respect to our residential neighbors. It also illustrates a total reimagined experience running north-south at the middle of the parcel, giving France Avenue a much more pedestrian-friendly and landscape revision. We want to note that any trees displaced on the east side of the site along Valley View will be redistributed around the parcel, providing a greater dispersal of shade and site water management. As you will see, this is in direct contrast to the earlier slides showing the bare commercial parcels directly to our east. Our site is intentionally much more green and landscaped. So our project team also acknowledges that the notion of surface and structured parking may come into question here. The zoning ordinance, as well as the tenant and guest experience, will require sufficient quantities of nearby parking to access each of the buildings. Additionally, the increased medical presence within the buildings will inherently want more covered parking that is closer in proximity. In order to develop anything in the future, the site will need somewhere to replace the stalls required by both code and existing contracts. This slide depicts the reason for what may otherwise be perceived as an oversupply of parking within the ramp along Valley View. Our intent is really not to overbuild or oversupply. Our goal is to use this ramp to better accommodate the new building's users and still achieve the city's goals for the eastern side of the project. It is our goal to prepare for any surface stalls that may be displaced as a result of future development. While we don't know exactly what that looks like, again, we are requesting the approval of up to 150 more stalls within the west ramp to prove we can accommodate a future development phase. As mentioned previously, studies reveal that the high water tables deter a feasibility of underground parking in certain areas of the site. When we weighed the risks of disturbing that water table, a potential impact that could be very hard to contain, versus the risks of displacing some of the mature trees, an impact that we could be treated with reforestation around the site, we determined that placing structured parking on the west side of the medical office building was the more practical course. Additionally, the tree grove itself is in an existing state that requires selective pruning along with removal of deadfall and diseased trees. Some trees will also likely be affected to make way for the internal pedestrian paths that we are creating, and this also may be a trade-off in making way for the new western promenade being introduced on our site throughout that area. Entitling the site for future parking needs will allow for the future growth within the site. I think the final slide we have today is as we develop the site in the future and the design of the building particularly, we acknowledge that the POD zoning requirements relative to building mass, building height, transparency, material palette, all will be taken into account. This slide just illustrates precedent material uses in the area and the idea for proposed materials for what may be the new building. Thank you. I'm going to give it back to Sean here for any closing remarks, and then we'll look forward to your comments.
Thank you. Mr. Smith, go ahead.
Well, as a daily contributing member of this community, we recognize the importance of developing a project that reflects the quality of the surrounding neighborhood and the greater Southdale district. Prior to submitting our formal application, we would like to invite you all on site to show you the constraints discussed tonight, but also the opportunity that this project presents. We are thankful for your time and consideration, and we are glad to receive your questions or comments.
All right, thank you. Yes, I'm sure we'll have questions and comments. I'm going to start with Member Agnew.
Thank you. And thank you for the detailed presentation. It's always helpful to start off something like this with some of the constraints, because there are definitely constraints with the site. It's also exciting to know that change is coming to the 6600, 6800 block of France Avenue. In my time on the City Council, as well as in the Planning Commission, I've seen multiple projects, or I guess sketch plans, come across. And what I see here today, though, doesn't reflect my excitement or what I was looking for. And I'm also kind of struggling to tie together where a lot of your excitement is coming from, transparently. What I'm looking at here appears to me like a 1970s office park. But that's what I'm hearing you're trying to get away from. And so I'm kind of not seeing the tie to your proposal with the energy and the excitement to what I'm seeing here on paper of what it actually looks like. When you pull up the Google Maps view of this site, and you can really quickly count the number of cars in the parking lot, because it's 220. And so right now, this is 6x parked for this entire site of what was being used. And again, on a random day, but I drive past this 4 times a day, if not more, and know that there are often not cars there. And so what I am taking from this proposal is we're going to keep most of it the same, we're going to reskin a little bit of it, but we're going to add a parking ramp. And that, to me, just really misses the point. This is such a pivotal entry point into the Southdale area. The proximity of the site and the opportunity with this site is immeasurable. And I've seen other proposals, and yes, not all, obviously none of those came to fruition. But there's so much promise within this site. When I think about this being that connection to the community, the neighborhood on the other side. There's nothing drawing me into this site, and yes, I hear that pedestrian experience was added, and I can see some of the sidewalks. But a pedestrian experience within a sea of parking isn't really much of an experience, right? It might mean that the people who are working there can go and walk outside and walk around a building, but that doesn't mean that it's been connected to the broader Southdale area or to that neighborhood. I can't imagine living right there and saying, let's cross six lanes right there of Valley View to go and walk around a parking ramp, to then maybe cross the street, and yes, it might be a little bit safer, but to get to the mall, you're in another sea of parking. And so I'm just not seeing the vision and the evolution of what this site really needs to be to bring it into the future. I will now defer to my other council members to also provide feedback, but I guess I'll summarize with I want more for this site. Thank you.
Member Jackson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So actually, I have kind of the opposite reaction. Compared to what we saw when I was first elected, this feels so much, the word that was used in 2021 was campus, and this actually feels like a campus to me now. And when I first looked at this, I'm like, this is you want to preserve those two office buildings. I get that. And this makes it all kind of tie together. So I've got comments. The first thing, though, I want to have a question that's prompted from your thing is, I see the connection going south from the medical office building to 6800. How does it go north?
It's on. All right, perfect. Actually, you'll see a little dashed line here that is coming out and into the 6600 building. Originally, we were proposing that could be an underground connection, but we're thinking that may need to be an on-grade connection just due to some of the grade changes and things in that area. So that dashed line that you're seeing here would be a direct connection back to the 6600 building.
Okay, so and the ones going south, are those a skyway, or is that a ground level?
Currently, those are proposed as ground level connectors.
So that really kind of kills the whole outdoor room and the connectivity. I was hoping those were skyways, because it really is. If you cut off those sidewalks to the community, there is no connectivity. So that kind of kills the whole thing for me, honestly, because I've walked the site many times, and that Oak Grove is so beautiful, and to be able to walk through it and up and across to France Avenue directly without having to go all the way around the building, that's the key to this site, and that's the key to the connectivity and everything that makes it worthwhile. So I'll just tell you, if it's feasible to make a skyway, I strongly recommend that. The next question I have for you is between the go ahead.
I think we actually are addressing that. I think we do want those open up to the neighborhood, so there could be a double set of doors in there that would allow the neighborhood to access our buildings internally, but also to go through the site as well. So we don't have the final design on that, but that's the intent. And I think at the neighborhood at the neighborhood meetings, there was a lot of strong sense for, you guys need to maintain the connectivity, but is there a way to get through the site? And so we are looking at potentially putting those doors in there.
Okay. And if they're going to be open to the public 24/7, you have to think about the security of that too.
Absolutely.
So it's a double-edged sword, but thank you for thinking about that, because that's super important. The next question I have for you is between the 6800 building and the parking ramp. That seems pretty tight. Do you think there's going to be enough sunlight there for those trees to grow?
Right now we have that. Apologies. Right now we have that set at it's about 45-50 feet at the current time, so it is a fairly adequate size. I think what's a little off-putting about it is just recognizing the full scale of this site in its full context. I think it's hard to imagine how big that is when you're looking at a 22.5 acre site on a full plan here.
Okay. That's extremely helpful. Thank you. The next thing I'm doing is looking at the sidewalk along France. And when we looked at a different project on France, the neighbors said the way the sidewalk was designed is you had to actually go out into France to cross. So when I see those diagonal sidewalks there, I want to make sure that if you're walking the neighborhood, if you're walking down France, you don't have to go out into the street in order to cross it. I'm a little concerned about how a pedestrian would, so this is a tiny detail, but something that's really important to that lived experience. So to make sure that that's super safe for people who are walking all the way along France. In your presentation, when I was reading ahead of time, I think you may have covered this, but you said that you're going to handle some of the water on site by daylighting it. Is that those dark green spots on the diagram that we're looking at? Or are those going to be like rain gardens, or how are you going to handle some of that water this is such a wet spot?
Yeah, exactly. I think you're right on. Currently, those dark green spots are areas for water retention or water remediation ponds. So we haven't worked out all the details of if it's a standing water pond or something that is really more for remediation throughout the soils. But that is the areas that we've highlighted currently within the plan for some of those water.
That's very helpful. Thank you. So I think you addressed the trees. It looks like you're going to have to lose some of them. How many of the trees are you going to have to take out to put a sidewalk through there?
Yeah, so actually we ran some numbers on that when we were working through this parking ramp, and currently the tree grove is about 70,000 square feet in its kind of mass. What we are looking at is reducing it down to about 56,000 square feet. So we're losing about 15,000 square feet of area for these tree groves. Withstanding you can see that the path that's kind of meandering through there is just that, meandering, and I'm hoping that we can preserve trees with the way that we design that path. But the overall reduction, I will say, from the 70,000 to the 56 is only about 21% of what's existing there today. And like I think we mentioned in the previous or in the presentation, there is a lot of deadfall. It needs pruning. There's a lot of cleanup kind of within that area, and so some of that is just going to happen as a part of kind of as a part of revitalizing, I guess, this tree grove.
Okay, I know that's super important to the neighborhood there. Let's see. Tell me a little bit more about when you say you're going to make this a gateway. What does that mean specifically? Because this is such a key entrance into the Southdale area.
Yeah, for us, and really the reason for the focus on medical and well-being services, I think the Chamber of Commerce has put together that gateway, this destination medical center. Well, I shouldn't call it that. I believe that's what they call it down in Rochester. But this corridor, I think, you have Fairview, Southdale, kind of on that just south of 62. There's really not much they can do over there, and so we're really the next site that can accommodate true best-in-class kind of new medical facilities. And so, some of those, needs from the medical users are somewhat at odds with some of the things that the city wants to see with internal or external connections and everything like that. But generally speaking, I think we've done a good job to utilize kind of the Southdale design experience guidelines on this plan, but also respect the needs for the true users that are going to be using this building on a daily basis, and the patients that are going to need a lot of that design, that medical-centered design in the building.
Okay, thank you. So we often talk about activation, and we've got the people who are there during the day, and then the evening we've got the restaurant. You mentioned in the 6600 building there's a workout space. Yep. Is that something that's internally used, or is that open to the public as well?
That's just internal.
Okay, thank you. So again, going back to that sidewalk along France, I want to make sure that that's really a comfortable walking experience. And I don't know how to translate that into architectural terms, but I think you understand where I'm going, because that's going to be the key to the future of France, is that walking up and down the avenue. You also mentioned that originally it was going to be built in phases. Is this going to be built in phases, or is it going to be able to do fairly, how long do you think from beginning to end it will be to build this?
Yeah, so this plan, what you see here today, all the new improvements, those will get done in one phase. So, and I think that addresses some of maybe Councilmember Agnew's is just not seeing. This is purposely able to fix what's needed first, and you guys will. The council will have the opportunity to review any plans in the future for the north or south, and we just simply don't know what those are yet today. I think by anchoring this center building as medical, and with all of the medical uses that are in 6600, we believe that parking lot area, or that area along 69th there, is truly that will continue to enhance that medical gateway. And then as a professional office center on the south with some retail and other uses that are maybe closer to shopping and dining, those could be residential, those could be other type of restaurants or retail as well. So, but I think what you're seeing today is just the start of really the fulfillment of some of these South Del Rio plan goals. So
terrific. And then my last comment is actually a little piece of advice. Put as much parking as you need to meet your needs. If you want to vary it down for our needs, that's encouraged. So we don't need to we as a city don't need you to overpark it, so please take that into consideration, that we don't want you to overpark it, and we'd be happy if you underparked it, but that's a business decision. But as far as planning goes, you can underpark it. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Jackson. And then Member Urser.
Thank you. I appreciate the presentation. I am excited about having more of the medical district in the area go forward. One thing, this is a site, and it was commented that very much a 70s building, and but it's a 70s era. And during the 70s, there was this huge environmental movement and push and trees and all of that. And what I did is I traced the outline that you are going to create, or the trees and where they would be on the parking ramp. And I live and I go by this area a lot, and most of the leaves are off the trees. So now I can see 6700. And as I've walked by there a lot of times, I thought, wouldn't it be so cool to work in that building, because you would look out and you would see a tree. And then yesterday I was at a medical facility where I was able to look out and see birch trees because they were right out my window, and it enhanced my experience. And as I look at what your plans are, you are really eliminating the opportunity for people in the proposed medical office building to have that view, or for patients to have that view, or for there to be a cafeteria where the workers can go and they can see that it's a sunny day or that it's snowing or raining. And how many of us have had the experience of going to a medical facility, chatting with the nurse, and they're asking, is it sunny outside? Because a lot of times you don't get that connection. And so what's frustrating, and my fellow council members have noted this, is just real concern for the trees and the parking. And I would really encourage you to not remove that. And if you look at your slide where you see the original plan, can we go back to that? Look how they have the parking. It's this little crescent shape, so that what that does is it minimizes the amount of parking adjacent to the grove, thereby making it possible for people to see trees. And I think that, and you have forest bathing now, you have all of that. And so I think there's a real opportunity. You could plug this as the ultimate, we're bringing nature into the office. This is why you should come here. The other thing is, can we go to the slide that shows the overview of I think it was one of the first ones, so I can see, yeah, that one. Okay, I don't know if you have thought about this, but you've got France Avenue, you've got Valley View Road. You have the property that does not have any kind of conflict point or driveway along 70, where am I? 66, sorry.
66, yeah.
Thank you. And so this is a real need that we have to have sidewalks going along here and then sidewalks going along Valley View. My colleagues have talked about the import of pedestrian access to France. You've got these medical workers. They want to get outside. They could go to Roslyn Park and they could walk around. And so I think that's got to be a pedestrian pathway there. And if you look across the road, you've got a conflict point on the north side of 66. You go further down, it's really hard to negotiate getting to Valley View Road from France. So you're in talk about pinch point. That is an opportunity pinch point to make access possible. The other thing is, when we talk about pinch points, that neighborhood is really close and snugged up, and I appreciate what you're saying when you want to respect the residents, but I think this tree growth, respect the future workers in your building and give them access to the trees and figure out a way to do parking so that, when I think about the Container Store, they've got parking above the store. We just saw a sketch plan for a project that had all of this parking above. Figure out a way so that you don't have to sacrifice those trees. That is my biggest concern. I think you could make it an amazing medical center and sell it on the closest to nature. What if you had, an office that looked out? I love the idea of the cafeteria. And I guess I'm going to have a better view next time I go to and I'll be on the second floor. But that could be something that could be a real asset instead of just, what do you want to say, challenge. Thank you.
Would you go to slide 9, please? I think that's one. It's good to work off of. All these comments are terrific. Of course, I'm a tenant in your building, on the 6800 building, and so I'm there all day, every day. That Oak Savanna is really an important feature. I think Member Risser just talked about it, and to think about even losing 20% of it is difficult. But I also know the challenges that you've faced in trying to think about the design experience guidelines. At least this is what I assume has happened, is that when you look at France Avenue and you think about pushing the building back 50 feet and then having the pedestrians at 20 feet, which is how much further back would, under the new plan, would pedestrians be from the street than they are now?
Currently with the sidewalk along France Avenue, or the more pedestrian experience
along France Avenue.
The sidewalk along France Avenue, we're pushing it in another 10 to 15 feet.
10 to 15 feet. That's what I thought. Further west.
Yep.
All right. And then you put in a couple rows of parking there to accommodate people that want to park and go right into the medical office building. Some of that will be handicap access, and that's an important thing to have. But I can see then you push that medical office building back to the 50-foot mark, which is also part of the design experience guidelines. So now, as you just try to meet the design experience guidelines requirements under our visioning and what we've seen other parts of the France Avenue and other projects, it pushes you back into the grove.
You're seeing,
and so you get into this inevitable. Either you save all the trees and push everything towards France Avenue, or you get rid of some of the trees and comply with what we want to see happen on France Avenue. Really, it's a really not necessarily a Hobson's choice, but it is a difficult situation. And when I look at the report from Mick Johnson, where he's pretty highly critical of the your meeting of the design experience guidelines, I feel like sometimes dreams and vision that we all have get tempered by harsh reality. And even though you got 22 acres here that you're trying to work with, it still creates some difficulties, as we've just seen by the illustration of moving things back and forth to accommodate the design experience guidelines on France Avenue and create more separation and more green space and more comfort for pedestrians. Then something's got to give, right? So when I look back at the parking ramp there, there's already parking back there. How many spots are back there compared to what you'd pick up with a parking ramp? I take it it's a 2-level ramp?
So we haven't finalized the design of the ramp. Part of the two slides that showed, I don't know if you can go to like 14 and 15. So right now, if we build the proposed medical office building today, we only want to park what's needed. And so that shows 300 stalls. In order for us to do something in the future, we need certainty to be able to move those cars that are currently parked there for the tenants in the 6600 building, for example. So we want to be able to phase it, and we don't want to overbuild that parking today to accommodate a potential future need in the future. So I think that's where this flexibility comes in. As of tonight, I think what's shown here would be a 2-level ramp. The second level would be essentially on grade. And then at some point in the future, depending on what we do, either on the north or south, a future level would be accommodated.
Yeah. So I know that because of the comings and goings of people that are going to medical appointments, the parking requirements are fairly expansive for medical office. And I see you've got 130 spots in the front there. And you're providing for another 300 in the back. And what does the code require?
Code for the restaurant,
medical office?
For the restaurant and medical office combined, as you can see, there's the 130 kind of includes some of the restaurant parking that would be there as well. It would be 325 stalls, but that also takes into account that we're removing that contiguous, I guess, surface lot that's along the east side of the site today, which is currently what is helping to park some of the 66 and 6800 buildings. So we're trying to kind of, as a whole, park this site on the right, I guess, at the right ratio.
Yeah. So
yeah, with respect to proximity too.
What I see happening today from being there is that for the tavern, they've got that lot next to them, and then overflow parking goes to the south towards Bank of America. And it doesn't go to the north because there's a barrier there, and then there's the 6750 building or 6700 building. So nobody parks over there. So I'm wondering if the natural flow isn't really to park in that south lot, even if you rebuilt Tavern on France and connected it to 6800. What I'm trying to get at is the same thing I think other people in the council have gotten at, and that is whether you look at this slide or you look at slide 9, but what we see is something that we recognize that you need is a certain level of parking in order to attract tenants, or they're just not going to come. But we don't want you to, as Member Jackson said, we don't want you to overpark it either, because we're trying to compress down parking over time. I mean, there's a lot of good reasons for that. So when you come later on to talk about what you might do in that northeast corner or towards the Bank of America, we still face some of that water table issue, but to the extent that we can then kind of focus in on the middle, I still think it's not quite right yet. And people shouldn't have to go through that was a good catch by Member Jackson. People shouldn't have to go through a set of double doors to walk through from east to west. And I don't think you want to open 24 hours a day so people can get in there into that vestibule area. You want to think about that a little bit. And it seems like a really narrow sort of connection. So I'm worried about trees. I'm worried about if you put a parking ramp in the back, that even though it's in the back of the building, it's next to all that nature and it's next to Valley View. Valley View, I feel, could be really spruced up from a landscaping standpoint, and it needs to be. I just think it's a beautiful side of the building, and you don't want to treat it like the alley. You don't want it to be, so then I think we got to talk about, when you come back, if you come back, some kind of cladding on that ramp. I mean, I don't think anybody in the suburbs can build ramps the way they used to build them and just have an open ramp. We talked hard with Southdale Medical Office when they redid that one, and we got some glass pieces, accents on the corners, but it's still kind of an open ramp on the sides. But better models are down at TCO, down at Pinstripes, where even though it's a parking ramp, it still fits in there better. So I think you'll have to think about that a little bit.
Yeah, I think between the existing tree grove that's there, planting some deciduous trees along there, but also cladding as well, I think we'll shield a lot of that. We will be very conscious of that, and in our proposed plan, obviously we will have we will meet the requirements of the POD, but also exceed them because we know how we're close to Cornelia.
When you switch from POD to PUD, and we had that beautiful plan that I think Dean DeVolis and his team designed, we had that internal Wurnerf that Member Agnew's talking about, I think is probably her recollection. It was a gorgeous vision that didn't work. I mean, that's why it didn't get built for a reason. And so here we are now trying to figure out in this environment that we're in, we know that you're onto something here with medical office. I think it's really a great use, and that whole area is a cluster of medical office that's expanding a little bit, and that's a good thing. It's a good thing for the neighborhood. It's a good thing for the physicians that are doing the work. It's a good thing for patients that are coming, and it's really good for our town from an economic standpoint. To be known as a medical cluster anchored by the hospital and having things emanate out from the hospital in terms of services that are going to be provided, I think it's really good, and I'm really happy about that. I think others have mentioned that as well. So I think you're onto something there. How we work together to make sure that we kind of maximize the chances of complying with what we think are good principles in the design experience guidelines in your project, we just keep working at it, I guess. Now, on Mick Johnson's statement, it was from like the 21st of September. Have you made any different improvements in the design since the 21st of September that we should know about, so we don't look at his letter and think he's talking about something that you had in front of us tonight?
Yeah, so both Carrie and myself had mentioned when we initially submitted for the sketch plan, we presented two plans, and they were under two different scenarios. They were very similar buildings, very similar improvements, but one was under a PUD to amend the PUD, and one was to the POD. And I think we essentially came to the conclusion that we just can't meet the intent of the 2017 PUD with the market conditions, the pricing, the high water table. Our site just can't accommodate it. And so that's when it became clear, instead of pushing a ball up a hill with people pushing back, we need to address the desires of the market, but also fix certain parts within our site as well. And so what we did, I have Mick Johnson's comment. Do you want to just hand me that? So I think we've addressed a lot of that.
You might want to provide us with that information supplementally in written form.
Okay. And within the agenda, our previous plans that we submitted were in there as well, right, Carrie? Yep. So.
Yeah, we'll just take his letter. Maybe I didn't see it, but maybe
do this. Red line comments.
Yeah,
but I can type it up.
There's been a number of significant changes that have really enhanced the pedestrian and just experienced throughout the site, breaking down of the massing and things like that. So we took those words to heart and really did our best to accomplish what he was looking for.
Whatever happened to that notion that we had that, we knew that you were gathering water from about 10 properties, and we were going to put some kind of a holding tank or a cistern or something over in that northwest corner, and then filter it and drain it into Lake Cornelia. What happened to that idea of being a partner with the city on that? And would that make any difference in terms of creating more ability for you to meet the design experience guidelines and create more green space other places?
Yeah, I think we are always open to being a partner with the city. This is certainly pertinent to that process. I think as it relates to what's currently proposed and what we're planning, we would certainly meet not only the city guidelines, the POD guidelines or the ordinance, but also the requirements of the 9-mile watershed creek district as well. Beyond that, yes, there are area-wide stormwater challenges, and our site kind of is downstream. If you pull up, for example, the third slide that shows the overall aerial. Yeah, I don't know if Chad Milner's still here, but Southdale Mall that is one block of impervious space, and I don't know off the top of my head how all that gets into Cornelia or whatnot, but we're right in between that and Cornelia. So.
Yeah, but you've got the stormwater management issue figured out, is what I hear you saying, for what you want to do.
Yep. So most of the sites around Southdale do not currently manage stormwater. They just haven't been updated. For example, ours from the 70s. So our site actually takes a significant portion and manages that stormwater. I haven't updated the calcs, but based on the previous plan, I think we were able to hold approximately 190 gallons of water versus having it run into the stormwater system. So it's a significant improvement for what we're doing here today.
All right. Okay. I hope that was helpful for all of you. I don't know if any of my colleagues have any additional thoughts based on the conversation we've all had, but thanks for coming in this evening, and we'll look forward to hearing more from you.
Thanks for your comments.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate the time.
All right, now we've got the topic that we haven't visited about for a while, and that's an AUAR. And Director Teague's going to bring us up to speed on this update he has on the Resolution 2023-82, which is an update to the Gateway Alternative Urban Area-wide Review. And Director Teague, I'll turn it over to you.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. This goes back to 2007 when this was originally put together. It's for the Pentagon Park area. It's 135 acres essentially from Highway 100 to France Avenue along 77th. These types of environmental reviews need to be updated every 5 years, so there's been updates along the way. Andy Moffett from WSB is here. She was the originator of the 2007 plan as well as the 2 updates, and she is here to present the latest update. And the action tonight is that we ask you to adopt the resolution that's in front of you this evening.
All right. Ms. Moffett, welcome. Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you all again. I'm here for another kind of environmental review. As Mr. Teague indicated, the AUAR, Alternative Urban Area-Wide Review, and it's become a career project for Mr. Teague and I, as it does get updated every 5 years. And so the big heavy lift was back in 2007 when the original document was put together. And so what an AUAR does looks at a study area. It does not look at specifically a development coming in to review the environmental review documents. It looks at a larger area and contemplates what different scenarios look like if we redeveloped, and develops mitigation plans with that. So the gateway area is, as Mr. Teague indicated, 135 acres in between France and 100, and just north of the city's border with Bloomington. So it is a state environmental review document, which actually takes the form of, similar to the environmental assessment worksheet, which we actually talked about on a different site a few months ago. So it's the same questions, essentially, but it looks at different development scenarios and is a bit more robust related to the review that's done. And then it also comes up with a mitigation plan. So, and this does, to remain valid as the environmental review document, it means that when an area develops or redevelops, it does not need to do its own separate EAW. It actually gives the city, as the responsible government unit, a wider view and a bigger view as opposed to a piecemeal view. So that's why it is a useful document when you're looking at what might happen if an area redevelops. So the original was 2007, and we've been updating it every 5 years, so it remains a valid environmental review. So if and when an area redevelops, it's got kind of a guide plan for what mitigation might look like. The city knows what infrastructure might look like, and a separate EAW isn't needed. So when we do these updates, it evaluates what has redeveloped in the area since the previous update or the original document. It reviews the stated mitigation measures. Are those still valid? Do you need to update those? If there's any environmental review update that's needed. In this case, additionally, the state had changed some of the questions and included a greenhouse gas analysis. So that got added into the update. And then there is, it's just a short comment period, but it is a 10 working day public and agency comment period that has occurred. So that comment period ended a few weeks ago, and the comments were received from the Corps of Engineers, the Met Council, Hennepin County, and MnDOT. And the comments were they were in keeping with nothing that was surprising to me on the comments. A lot of it had to do with traffic, bike and pedestrian access, and then the greenhouse gas analysis. And really through that comment period, the comments are received. There weren't really any significant issues that were identified, but their comments were addressed, and there were some revisions from the draft AUAR update that went out. There were some revisions in the final document that is in your packet tonight. So really the next steps at this point is for the city to consider adoption of the AUAR update, and that would serve as a requirement environmental review if you adopt it through 2028. And really sometimes the question is, how long do you have to keep updating this? And you keep updating it as long as really you want to, and or all the redevelopment that you think is going to occur in the area has been approved or completed. So with that, I am happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, good. Thanks, Ms. Moffitt. Questions for Ms. Moffitt? Member Jackson?
Yeah, so it's Southern Edina, which means water. Tell me what the findings were about the development that's occurred and may potentially occur. And then we've got the wetlands restoration and Fred Richards. Is there any big change in water management and runoff and stuff in the time period since we last looked at this?
Not significant change. You know, what would need to happen is anything that redevelops is going to need to meet city and watershed district requirements, and that's the mitigation associated with this. That has changed since 2007. You know, rules change, and so while the document does not prescribe you have to treat water in this specific manner, it is you're going to have to treat water to meet state, local, and watershed district requirements. So.
Okay, so the regulatory scheme has updated it for us, essentially, is what you're saying?
Correct.
Okay, good. That's my primary concern. Thank you.
Other questions? Member Risser?
This is just really basic, but we have met, if we approve this, we are within the time frame that is allowed.
Yes, you, while it might be a month or two past 5 years, that is not uncommon and it's okay. It doesn't mean the review was invalidated. It's very common for the process, and for regulatory bodies it sometimes takes a little bit longer. So it is, if you adopt it tonight, it is still valid. It still applies for your environmental review.
And I did try to find the August 31st, 2018 update number 2. I couldn't find it, but I found a June 2018 review, but that could be me not finding the correct thing online. And I went to, and this is not on you, I went to the link and I couldn't find those documents. But again, this could be user error, but I just wanted to note that.
Staff can dig that document out and get it for you.
All right, very good. All right, well, we've got a request for a resolution passage here, just to make sure we get the study updated and approved. Is there a motion to adopt Resolution 2023-82, which would be the adoption of the final alternative urban area-wide review, AUAR, update for the Gateway Study Area?
So moved.
Member Jackson moves.
Second.
Member Risser seconds the adoption of Resolution 2023-82 as described. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption of Resolution 2023-82 as described, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. Resolution 2023-82 is adopted. Thank you, Ms. Moffett.
Thank you.
All right, we are at the end of the action items here for the agenda this evening. And I don't think we have any commission correspondence to be concerned about, and so we will turn now to the manager's comments. And as he indicated earlier, I think he wanted to talk a little bit about the council starting to work on his annual performance review. Manager Neal.
Thank you, Your Honor. Today is November 8th, and I started working here exactly 13 years ago today. During that time frame, I was the recruiter selection consultant that the council hired in 2010 that resulted in me coming here was a guy named Harry Brule. Harry worked for PDI, Ninth House downtown, and the council hired him to also do the first few reviews of my performance here. He did a review in 2011. We skipped 2012 because of some timing issues, but he also did 2013, 14, 15, and 16. In 2017, we hired a fellow by the name of Nick Rule, who was I think an associate at one point with Mike Fisher. I think he was an architect and he was trying to get into the human resources field at that time. So we had him for 1 year. And after him, I think it was Kevin Staunton who recommended Craig Waldron. And Craig Waldron did the review in 2018, 19, 20, and 21. And we did not do a review in 22. So during those 13 years, we've had 11 performance reviews. My suggestion to the council is that the council seemed comfortable with Craig Waldron. I don't know, Councilmember Jackson, you got to meet, right? Okay. Online. So, online, yeah. We would propose to do that live this year. He would meet with each council member, interview you, get an understanding of your expectations and how you think things are going. There's probably some interviews with some staff as well. He brings you back together and goes over a report, and then we all meet together and go over that report together. So that's how we've done this in the past, and I looked at all three different people who've done the review. It's all essentially the same. It's a very personal kind of process. We also get together as part of this process and put together performance goals for me for the upcoming year. We didn't have a chance to do that last year as a group. I did it. I have some that I'll share with you that I established just to keep that custom going. But if that is acceptable to council, I can let Mr. Waldron know. There aren't a lot of people that do this kind of work for people like me. But if we get on his list, he would put us on the list and he would do it late December, early January, something like that. If that sounds okay, we'll make it happen.
Yeah.
Okay.
I've worked with him, I think, 2-3 times. He does a thorough job. He also asks you to evaluate yourself.
That's right.
He meets with you.
Yep, there's a self-review process that I share with you, and then we process that together too.
To the point you just made, you establish your own standards annually in terms of what you want to accomplish and what you in your own performance, and then you evaluate that against yourself along with Craig Waldron as part of his processes.
Okay.
So I think we should go with Craig Waldron again. As a former city manager, as I recall, many years doing that, and has been in this business quite a few years, and I think he'd serve us well again. People are comfortable with that. You can direct manager Neil. I don't think we need a motion for that.
We don't. His contract is really quite a bit under the $20,000 level, so we don't need to bring that back to council. But it looks like you're giving me the okay, so I'll get him going.
Okay.
2 other quick items. One is that we need to establish a canvassing vote by the council to canvass the returns from yesterday. We are going to, and we have to do that by, I think, November 19th. I don't have, she told me, it's before our next, we have to have it done prior to the next council meeting. So Ms. Allison suggested that we incorporate a very short canvassing meeting at our HRA meeting on November 16th, so next Thursday. This takes for council member, for our new council members, this takes 5 minutes to do, so it's very quick. If that sounds okay, we'll get that going too. And finally, just to thank all of the different staff and volunteers that worked hard to on all the educational efforts for the referendum. It was a big result yesterday. Almost all of the sales tax referendums across the metro and across the state were adopted. We probably had one of the larger kind of margins of victory in ours, and that means we got a lot of work to do now. So it was a big win. Thank you.
All right, good. Member Risser.
I would like to acknowledge a couple things. Appreciation of staff, and one connects to the proclamation that we did. And on October 27th of 2023, the recipients of a new federal grant, Safe Streets and Roads for All, was made, and Edina is one of 3 cities that received a grant. We will get $200,000 to develop a new action plan for Safe Streets for All planning, and it will focus on safe and equitable mobility. So I think that's worth a shout out. The other thing is I would like to acknowledge Manager Neil, Jen Garsky, Scott Denfeld, and Jake Miller. A lot of times we don't really understand what goes on behind the scenes to get this show on the road. And I needed to reach out to see if I could participate in council remotely. It turned out tonight I was able to come. But they were just instrumental in making that process go really smoothly. Last month was Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and I found out I do have breast cancer. It's in the early stages, so that's really good, and I'm hoping I can keep being here physically, but I may need to participate from home, and that is allowed legally. So I just want to be real open and also let people know that we're following protocol, we're doing everything we need to do, and there's an amazing crew of people that make it possible. So thank you for all of that.
Good. Thank you. Member Jackson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So we're really glad you're here tonight, Member Risser, and wish you a speedy recovery.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a big deal. So couple things. One is I hope that we can get a turnout report from Clerk Allison. I'd be interested to see, we didn't have a contested school board election, but it'd be interesting to see how the turnout this year compared to other past.
All part of that canvassing report.
Okay, wonderful. That's great. So, yes, thank you to everybody who worked the election, and whether you're an election judge or a staff member or a volunteer, and thanks to everybody to turn out to vote. It's always, election day is always exciting. I got the opportunity to go to St. Paul to the pipe fitters local union hall, the local 455, and they have a series of geothermal cooling systems. They don't actually have heatings, but Darcy Solutions has figured out a way to do geothermal on a small scale. It's a very high water table. It doesn't take a great amount of land to do. It was super, super exciting. Noah Silver from our staff was there as well, so he probably understood a lot more than I did. It was rather technical, but it's really cool. Some of the buildings that we're thinking about building, I hope we can consider geothermal, because it doesn't take that tremendous amount of land. It's from a fully developed area with a high water table. I'm like, that sounds familiar. So that was super cool. And the new flag designs are available on the Minnesota Historical Society website if you want to see all the different submitted designs. They're pretty cool. And that's it. Thank you.
For Public Works building is geothermal.
Yes.
Yeah. All right, very good. Councilmember Agnew.
Thank you. I just wanted to echo my appreciation for all of our election workers and volunteers. I had a fun time voting yesterday. I walked to my voting location, brought my daughters, my husband brought my daughters to vote. This year, they were really upset because they thought they were going boating.
Oh.
And so their experience in that was not as positive. But I know that we as a city are going to have 5 elections next year. So we will be going through that process 5 times. So I will appreciate the contributions of all that are involved in that every one of those times, because I know and I see all of the early voting that we do here. It's not that it's one day, it's many, many, many weeks. And so just really, truly appreciate everyone that's involved in that. So thank you.
Thank you. You caused me to think about a person, I can't recall her name now, I lived here several years ago, and she was really active in the arts, and she was able to get concerts going at the community center. And it was, the St. Paul Chamber Orchestra and maybe a subset of the Minnesota Orchestra, and then opera. And so somebody told me they took their kids to the opera, and the kids were all mad because they thought they were going to see Oprah. So it kind of fell into the same category as voting. And they did not like the opera, but they were really disappointed they didn't see Oprah. So. I too join my colleagues in saying thanks to our voters, and especially I think our staff and the volunteers in our town that worked on educating people about how this was not a new half cent, a new 0.5%. It was an extension of what we had received approval for last year, and it seemed to really resonate and be effective. Jennifer, thank you so much for your work, and our outside consultants' help. But then there's also former council members Ann Swenson and Peter Fitzgerald, who has worked on all of these matters, who was Volunteer of the Year last year. And every time they go back to work, and staff included, we get a higher winning percentage. And this year it was about 66%. So great work, everybody in the community. This is going to allow us to do some unbelievable things. As Perry Vetter, our park director, said in the hallway upstairs, this is all transformational stuff, and I believe that to be true. For the other election yesterday was for the school board. We had 3 people elected to the school board. Elliot Mann, husband of our state senator Elise Mann, one of our Senate districts, Cheryl Berry, and Jennifer Hugh. So congratulations to all of them, and look forward to working with them. And then I don't want to forget, in terms of congratulations, the Edina girls soccer team.
Oh, yes.
That won the state championship. It's remarkable, really. It's I think it was 40 years since they had won the state championship, and they had a fantastic team. And then, of course, let's not forget about boys football, which has been kind of on the back burner in years past. But now, tomorrow night they play Stillwater to get into the state to be able to go down to U.S. Bank Stadium and play Final Four. I think is probably what it is. No, Final Eight. Anyway, they play Stillwater tomorrow night at Park Center. Last Friday, I was on a panel. The Center for Transportation Studies at the University of Minnesota had an event at the McNamara Alumni Center. They're working on this overarching notion of the future of mobility. And so I was on a panel involving partnerships, and whether it was public, private, public, nonprofit, and it was a good little panel of folks. The moderator was Deb Barber from the Met Council, who was head of the transportation division. And then, as you all know, I'm on this Met Council task force set up by the legislature to evaluate whether or not there should be any recommendations made to the legislature on modifying the form of governance for the Met Council. So for our staff, and even for any of my council members that have had experiences or observations with regard to the Met Council, I think it might be good to start thinking about what do we think they do well, and what do we think, how do we think they could improve, and in what areas? You know, so far in this effort, what I'm seeing is no criticism around managing the sanitary sewer operations for the metro area. No criticism around parks. It's all falling on transit. And really, if you come down to it, I think a lot of it is at least perception that the Southwest LRT project hasn't been as well managed as it should have been managed. But the lens is still broad in scope, so I think that to the extent council members or staff have thoughts they'd want to share with me about the Met Council and the form of governance and where it could improve and what they do well, I'd appreciate that as we go through this process. We'll be working on this till the end of January, I'd expect. And then the legislature goes into session, I think, on the 11th of February. I think those were the items on my list. So it cause anybody else to think of anything else they wanted to address? All right, very good. Is there a motion to adjourn the meeting of the City Council of the City of Edina this 8th day of November 2023?
So moved.
All right, we got a dual. Give it to Member
Second.
Agnew, Member Jackson seconds. Member Agnew moves that we adjourn the meeting of the Edina City Council this 8th day of November 2023. All those in favor of adjournment say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. We stand adjourned.